Welcome back to our channel USA's Dark Secrets. If you are here for raw, real stories of betrayal and hard choices, stay with us and don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get started. Marina had always appeared to be the perfect wife. She was beautiful, elegant, and poised, often praised by everyone who knew her. To outsiders, she and her husband John were the epitome of the ideal couple. They had been married for 5 years, living in a lovely home in the city. John was a successful businessman, always striving to provide the best for his wife. Marina, the perfect homemaker, made sure that their house was always immaculate, that John's favorite meals were ready when he came home, and that she looked her best at all times. Their life seemed flawless from the outside, but Marina, despite her outwardly perfect life, began to feel an overwhelming sense of emptiness. For years, she had been the dutiful wife, fulfilling her role and supporting John's career. However, as time passed, she began to feel trapped in a routine, where every day felt like a repetition of the last. John worked long hours, often coming home late, and although he provided for her financially and loved her, Marina couldn't shake the feeling of being emotionally starved. She had become accustomed to the luxury and stability that came with being married to John, but what she truly longed for was excitement, passion, something more than the quiet life they had built. It wasn't that she didn't love John, she did. She just felt lonely and invisible. He was always busy with work, his focus consumed by his growing business empire. She understood it, but it didn't make her feel any less abandoned. Her dissatisfaction slowly turned into a quiet yearning for something more, something outside her marriage. She had long buried her desires under the surface, but they began to resurface one evening when she met someone unexpectedly. It was at a dinner party with mutual friends when Marina reconnected with Amir, a man she had known from her university days. Amir had always been charming, confident, and easy to talk to, but they had lost touch after Marina's marriage to John. That evening, Marina felt a strange spark. Amir was no longer just an old friend, he was now someone who made her feel alive, someone who reminded her of the woman she had been before marriage. The conversation was easy, effortless, and when they said goodbye, Marina couldn't help but feel a tinge of excitement. In the following days, Amir reached out to her, and the two quickly began chatting more frequently. At first, it was harmless, just an occasional message or phone call to catch up. But as the days passed, Marina found herself looking forward to their conversations. Amir made her feel special. He was attentive, he asked about her day, and he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. It was the kind of attention she hadn't received in years. Gradually, Amir's presence in her life grew. They exchanged flirtatious messages, joked about the old days, and shared intimate details about their lives. Marina's heart raced when he texted her, and she found herself fantasizing about him in ways she hadn't in a long time. This connection quickly turned into something more. The first time they kissed, it felt like an explosion, an eruption of emotions she had kept buried for far too long. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but the temptation was too strong. She justified her actions by telling herself that John was too busy to notice, and that she deserved to feel desired. Marina convinced herself that this affair, this secret rendezvous with Amir, was just something to fill the void in her life. She had no intention of destroying her marriage, at least, not at first. But the more she spent time with Amir, the more the lines between right and wrong blurred. Her affair with Amir quickly escalated. Marina found herself drawn into a world of secrecy, one where passion and excitement reigned. But as she immersed herself deeper into this new relationship, she also began to seek attention from other men. Each time she felt bored or neglected, she would reach out to one of them, Saqib, Fahad, and a few others who were eager to fill the void she felt inside. With every new man, Marina felt more powerful. She was desired by multiple men, each one offering her something different, whether it was the gentle nature of Saqib, the bold confidence of Fahad, or the thrill of being pursued. Each man fed a different need in her. She felt wanted, important, and special in ways she hadn't experienced in her marriage. At first, Marina could manage the situation. She would text each man at different times of the day, ensuring she kept her secrets hidden from John. She would send him to the store while she slipped out for quick meetings or dinners with her lovers. Every time John asked where she was going, she would smile and tell him she was out with friends or attending a work meeting. John trusted her completely. He had no reason to suspect that his wife, the woman he had loved for so long, was betraying him. Marina had become a master of deception, her lies growing more elaborate as she balanced her double life. But as time went on, she began to feel the weight of her actions. The guilt gnawed at her, but the rush of excitement she got from sneaking around, from being with someone who wasn't John, kept her going. She told herself that it didn't matter, she was not hurting anyone. John never had to know, and in her mind, that made it acceptable. But as the months passed, things began to change. John, who had always been so focused on his career, started noticing small changes in Marina's behavior. She seemed distracted more often, lost in thought. She was spending more time on her phone and less time with him. There was less affection in their relationship, less intimacy. John tried to brush it off, assuming she was just busy, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the physical distance, it was the emotional disconnect that he sensed between them. He had always been a good husband, working hard to give Marina everything she needed. He had trusted her completely, but the longer he ignored his instincts, the more certain he became that something wasn't right. Finally, John decided to confront Marina. One evening, after another quiet dinner, he sat her down and asked if everything was okay. He had noticed the changes in her, and he couldn't ignore them any longer. Marina tried to dismiss his concerns, telling him that she was just tired or stressed from work. But John wasn't convinced. He knew her too well. There was something off about her behavior, and his gut told him the truth. John's suspicions led him to hire a private investigator. He couldn't live in the uncertainty any longer. The investigator followed Marina for several weeks, documenting her every move. The truth was devastating. The investigator uncovered not just one affair but multiple. Marina had been meeting different men at various locations, all while hiding the truth from her husband. When John saw the photos, videos, and messages, his world crumbled. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had built a life with, had been unfaithful to him in the worst possible way. He was devastated, humiliated, and heartbroken. The trust they had built over the years was gone. John confronted Marina with the evidence. He could barely speak as he showed her everything, the texts, the photos, the surveillance footage. For a moment, Marina looked shocked, almost as if she couldn't believe it. But then the reality set in. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. Instead, she tried to justify her actions, claiming that John had neglected her, that he hadn't been there for her emotionally. She said she had felt alone, invisible, and that she had been seeking something, anything, to make her feel alive again. John was silent. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The woman he had loved, the woman he had devoted himself to, was telling him that it was his fault. She had betrayed him, and yet, she was placing the blame on him. His heart shattered as he realized that Marina had already made up her mind. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She had been living in her own world, and in her mind, she had done nothing wrong. The confrontation ended in silence. John didn't know what to say or do. His world had been torn apart, and he didn't know how to put it back together. Marina, on the other hand, felt an emptiness she couldn't ignore. The men who had once adored her were now slipping away. They didn't want a commitment, they didn't want her. They had only been interested in the thrill of the affair, and once the novelty wore off, they were gone, alone, with nothing left but the memories of her choices. Marina began to realize the cost of her actions. She had destroyed the one thing that mattered most, her marriage. The men she had sought to fill the void had abandoned her, and now, she was left to face the consequences of her selfishness. John, meanwhile, spent the next few days in a whirlwind of emotions. He was angry, devastated, and confused. He didn't know whether he could ever forgive Marina. He knew he deserved better than the lies and deceit she had fed him, but he also didn't know if he could just walk away from the woman he had once loved. Eventually, John made a choice. He left. He couldn't continue living a lie. He knew that no matter how much he loved Marina, he couldn't stay in a marriage built on betrayal. The pain of her actions would never allow him to fully trust her again. Weeks passed, and Marina reached out to John, begging for forgiveness. She apologized, promised to change, and asked for a second chance. But John had changed. The man who had once been willing to do anything for her was gone. He had learned the hard way that sometimes, even love isn't enough to fix what's been broken. In the end, John chose to rebuild his life without her. And Marina, left with nothing but regret, was forced to live with the consequences of her choices. The story ended with both of them at a crossroads, their lives forever changed, and the realization that betrayal had torn apart a love that was once so beautiful. After John left, Marina's life spiraled downward in a way she hadn't anticipated. In the months that followed, she found herself alone in their once shared home, the silence deafening. The luxurious surroundings, the home filled with memories, felt cold and empty now. She had no one to share her thoughts with, no one to talk to. The men who had been her fleeting distractions had all disappeared, their interest fading the moment they realized she wasn't the woman they had once pursued. She had been a source of excitement, but to them, she was never more than that. As the days passed, Marina felt the weight of her actions settle deeper into her chest. She could no longer justify her decisions. She had betrayed the one person who had loved her unconditionally. John had given her everything, and she had thrown it away for temporary thrills, for moments that now seemed hollow and meaningless. The attention she had craved from other men had not filled the void within her, instead, it had left her emptier than before. The reality of what she had done started to gnaw at her soul. Every corner of the house reminded her of the man she had lost, the man who had trusted her, who had believed in their marriage. Marina spent her days replaying the moments leading up to the affair, the justifications she had made in her mind, and the lies she had told herself. She had convinced herself that she was justified in seeking out other men, that John's work had created the distance between them, but now it all felt so trivial. She realized that she hadn't even taken the time to talk to John about how she felt. She had acted impulsively, ignoring the person who had always stood by her. The guilt crushed her. She tried reaching out to John several times after he left, sending him messages and calling him, but he never responded. At first, it hurt her, but with each unanswered message, the realization sank in even deeper. John had made his decision. He had moved on. Marina was no longer a part of his life, and as much as she wanted to reverse the past, she knew she couldn't. Months went by, and Marina tried to get her life back on track. She threw herself into work, taking up new hobbies, and seeking therapy in an attempt to rebuild her sense of self. But even with all of that, she couldn't escape the feeling that something fundamental had been broken. No matter how much she tried to distract herself, the gnawing emptiness never fully went away. She began to question everything, the choices she had made, the man she had betrayed, and what her life was really about. She missed John more than she had ever thought possible. Not just for the security and stability he had given her, but for the love that he had offered. He had never asked for anything in return but her trust and devotion. She had broken both. In the quiet moments, she longed for his voice, for his embrace. But she knew that wasn't possible anymore. The trust had been shattered beyond repair, and no amount of apologies could undo the damage. Meanwhile, John's life had taken a different turn. He had struggled at first, feeling betrayed, heartbroken, and deeply disillusioned. The pain of losing Marina had been excruciating, but as the months passed, he began to heal. Slowly, he started to rediscover who he was without her. He focused on his business, worked harder, and even took time off to travel and find clarity. It wasn't easy, but little by little, he began to rebuild the man he once was, strong, independent, and capable of loving again, though he wasn't sure if he could ever open his heart to anyone the way he had with Marina. John's friends and family had stood by him, offering support during the most difficult time in his life. They had always liked Marina and never imagined she would betray him. But they were more concerned about John's well-being than anything else. They saw how devastated he had been, how much he had lost, and they rallied behind him, encouraging him to move forward and find happiness again. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, John received an unexpected message. It was from Marina. The message was simple: "John, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to say that I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, and I regret everything I've done. I've spent so many nights thinking about my mistakes, and I can't live with myself knowing I've lost you. If there is even a small part of you that could find it in your heart to forgive me, I would give anything for that chance. Please, let's talk." John stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to reply, to express the hurt and anger he still felt. He wanted to tell her how much her betrayal had scarred him, how he had trusted her with everything, only for her to betray him in the worst possible way. But another part of him, the part that still cared about her, hesitated. He knew that his heart was broken, and that it wasn't something that could be fixed easily. After a few minutes, he put his phone down and sighed. He wasn't ready. He needed more time. He couldn't rush into any decisions. For now, all he could do was focus on healing himself, on moving forward. He wasn't sure if he could ever fully forgive her, but he knew he couldn't let the pain of the past control his future. Days turned into weeks, and Marina continued to reflect on the life she had ruined. She had tried to move on, but nothing seemed to bring her peace. John was the only person who had truly loved her, and now she was faced with the consequences of her actions. There was no one left who cared for her in the way he had. One evening, as she walked through the streets alone, Marina thought about the life she could have had. She could have been happy with John. They had a strong foundation, a love that many envied. But she had sabotaged it, chasing fleeting desires that had only left her more isolated. Marina finally understood the true meaning of betrayal. It wasn't just the loss of a partner, it was the destruction of a relationship built on trust, love, and shared dreams. The regret consumed her. She had made a terrible mistake, and she had no way of undoing it. John, on the other hand, began to find peace in his own way. While he still struggled with the memories of his marriage, he was no longer defined by the pain Marina had caused him. He had learned the painful lesson that sometimes, love isn't enough to hold a relationship together. Trust was just as important, if not more so, and once broken, it could never be fully restored. Months later, Marina received a call from John. He had thought long and hard about the past and had come to a decision. He wanted to meet her. Not to rekindle their relationship, but to find closure. They met at a cafe, a place that once held so many memories for them. The conversation was heavy, filled with regret and sorrow. Marina apologized again, with tears in her eyes, explaining how deeply she regretted everything she had done. John listened, but there was no anger in his eyes. He had long accepted that their time had passed. He told her that he had forgiven her, not because she deserved it, but because he needed to free himself from the weight of the past. They both knew, however, that they could never go back to what they once had. Too much had changed. They parted ways that day, with a sense of finality. It wasn't a reunion or a fresh start, but it was a moment of peace. Marina walked away with a heart full of sorrow but a lesson learned. Betrayal leaves scars that may never heal, and the choices we make can have consequences that last a lifetime. For John, the road ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer shackled by his past. He had learned to love himself again and was ready to embrace whatever the future held, even if it meant opening his heart to new possibilities. He knew that life would go on, and that sometimes, the hardest thing was letting go of the past to make room for the future, and so, their story ended, not with dramatic closure, but with quiet acceptance. A chapter closed, both of them walking different paths, forever shaped by the love they had lost and the lessons they had learned.